is Puja Prema, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you. People may still be coming into this space, and I wanted to, again, just give you the structure of what this is. So we will be having at first a presentation, and then we'll be taking a little brief pause and then opening it up to a conversation amongst myself, Tiakasin, Ukambwa, and Monica, speaking about AI. I'll be asking them questions primarily. And then hopefully we'll have time towards the end to open up to you all for questions and conversation as a whole. So as I was introduced, my name is Puja Prema. I'm a multidisciplinary artist and a writer. I'm a weaver of ideas and stories and possibilities, remembering my own lineage wisdom into the future. And here, I'm really excited to nerd out with you about a subject that I've been thinking and really longing for deeper discussion around, which is artificial intelligence and what that means to those of us that are remembering ancestral culture, that are building communities of resistance and resilience in this time of collapse, and what it means to the reimagining education movement, but as a whole, for any of us who are artists, creatives, activists, researchers, and just people that care about this Mother Earth that we live with, as Tiakasin always says. So without saying anything more about the structure right now, I'm just going to jump into this presentation. Now, it is, I'm a very visual learner. And so this is a visual presentation. And I'm going to skip over a lot of things. So there's like a lot of information. And artificial intelligence is a huge topic. Like we have opened up just this massive Pandora's box basically today. And I hope it's the beginning of more conversations with these lovely people and others. So with that said, I am attempting to cast a big net, and not everything is going to be spoken about, and certainly not at length. So this is by no means exhaustive. And there will be moments to kind of participate in chatting for those of you that are into that. I'm not sure if we can do it, how much we can do it during the presentation. But right now, maybe before we start, I will say also that I'm here in North America, as it's called now, the United States, Turtle Island. I'm on the ancestral lands of the Mohican people. And the closest river to me is the Hudson and the Housatonic on the other side. And the closest mountains are the Taconic Mountains. And I invite you to write in if you're called, where you are situated and how you are situated, mountains, rivers, and ancestral lands, if it calls to you to share with us as we're all in space together. And if it allows in the presentation, I will invite you again to kind of write in, but I'm not sure if it will allow. And shortly we'll meet our other beautiful speakers. So welcome to Resisting a War Against the Imagination. Now, war may seem like a very strong term to use, but there are reasons why I chose that terminology. Originally, this was also called Resisting the Capture of the Imagination. And the war against the imagination is something that relates not only to artificial intelligence, but many levels of our experience here in our present reality in terms of resources and inner-outer resources and imagination. Resisting the war against the imagination, countering AI through earth-based natural intelligence. And where that beautiful first line comes from is a poem by Diane de Prima radical beatnik poet, where she writes that the only war that matters is the war against the imagination. All other wars are subsumed in it. And it doesn't mean that the wars and the genocides happening now, such as in Gaza and Sudan and Myanmar, and that have happened in history aren't incredibly important, but rather that they are all subsumed in a deeper war, which is a war of the mind and a war of the imagination, which we will be exploring tonight. So just to give you a sense of that, my intention here is to reorient together, because the orientation that we've been given about AI is very top-down and one-sided, and it needs to be dismantled, unpacked, looked at from all sorts of angles. So what we'll be walking through today are the following in a kind of storyline, beginning by asking the question really of what is intelligence, and therefore what is artificial intelligence? What are the promises and perils of AI? And what are these inner and outer resources that we might begin to be aware of are a threat? And how might we then protect them actively? What are, I call these the ologies? It's kind of a bucket for all sorts of pre-existing structural realities, systems, and thought that enable something like artificial intelligence to be rolled out in the way and at the speed at which it's happening currently. And then we will be asking, what is natural intelligence? What does that even mean, and where does that point us towards ultimately countering the assault against our imagination, which large language model systems of AI and other applications are doing. So first we might begin, I think we have to begin by asking, what is intelligence? What do we mean by that? And actually there's not one specific Webster dictionary about intelligence that we can encapsulate intelligence on. And that's something that we're going to be interrogating together. And therefore, is there even such a thing as artificial intelligence? Because we're told that indeed there is this thing called artificial intelligence. And however, we're never really given space to ask whether that's even in fact the truth. And researchers like Karen Howe have been interrogating that and asking whether that is in fact just a big hyperbole. Because if we don't have a set definition as a society over intelligence, then how can we even claim that there's such a thing as an artificial intelligence? So we will be looking at that. And as Alan Turing, who was a mathematician in the previous century, British mathematician, asked, can machines think? And what is thought, right? What can machines do, and what do human minds and non-human beings do with thought? Can machines think? So the promises of AI that we're told are everywhere and essentially going to make everything better are kind of summed up in these words by a treatise that Dario Amodei wrote a couple years ago. Now, he is the CEO of a company that there's a lot of right now controversy around, and we'll mention that briefly, which is Anthropic. And he's one of the slightly less bizarre tech billionaire bros. And I have included him here because I think it's important to hear from the mouth of the machine itself. So here it says, this is kind of putting together his idea of what powerful AI in its ultimate, or AI, artificial general intelligence, as some call it, he calls it powerful AI, would be able to do. And to the right of this, the image that we're looking at is one of the first computers which was called ENIAC in 1945. It was also part of military in the United States. So powerful AI would be smarter than a Nobel Prize winner across most all relevant fields, by which they mean those most useful to certain systems. It would do tasks automatically, like, quote, a good employee would, and with skills that exceed that of the most capable humans in the world. And it would absorb information and generate actions at roughly 10 to 100 times human speed. So we could summarize this as, quote, a country of geniuses in a data center. Sounds amazing, right? So some debate whether this is even ever going to happen, and others, like Amodai, have said that just within the last few months, they're actually, for the first time, able to have AI models compute mathematical problems that have never been able to be solved before by humans. They are able now to hand over coding to some of the best engineer coders in the world. And that was never possible even just 3 years ago. AI models couldn't solve simple arithmetic. So things are progressing at an incredible speed. So the promises of AI, here we go. This is the rallying of the tech billionaires we see. Um, I don't want to put a whole lot of attention on these guys, but because I'm quoting Dario Amodei a lot, he's the guy to the right. On the center, we have the famous Sam Altman, and to the left, Modi, who is the Prime Minister of India. And there was just a big summit in India, a tech summit, where Modi has pledged for a $200 billion investment into AI in India, half of that funded by Resilience Industries. And so I just want to know who I'm talking about. So the promises basically that these guys are seeing are not just in things like robotics, but are in things that are supposed to help everyday human beings, and basically go into these five categories: physical health and biology, neuroscience and mental health, economic development and poverty, peace and governance, and work and meaning. So, I mean, there's so much to unpack here, but just at the top with biology, I'm going to read this out. AI models could replace human clinical trials, perhaps altogether, for things such as mRNA vaccines and other medicines, prevent all sorts of diseases, including cancer and Alzheimer's, and offer, quote, biological freedom, which essentially is the ability for human beings to control the way they look, the way they feel, reproduction, and all the way to, of course, extending the human lifespan, perhaps indefinitely. Mental health. Above, he has a quote I thought was quite something, where he says, "I'm very optimistic about the quote compressed 21st, where everybody can get their brain to, quote, behave a bit better and have a more fulfilling day-to-day experience." So essentially, it's kind of a fix for what's not optimal in the human mind and the human experience. AI can do therapy, AI can fix our mental illness, can generally make life better. In terms of economic development, curing diseases in the global south, economic growth, and of course, crop technology through an AI-driven green revolution. I guess they never got the memo about the last green revolution. And mitigating climate change via carbon removal from the atmosphere. Peace and governance, there's a notion that AI could be somehow an impartial lens of justice and efficiency. And then in work and meaning, that essentially, there's a lot of talk that AI will take over potentially many, many jobs. And that's a big question mark. However, in the optimal sense of the tech billionaire mentality, a capitalist economy of AI systems would give out huge amounts of money, basically somehow or another, to humanity based on what AI systems think makes sense, which would be based on some judgment ultimately derived from human values. Whose values are those? So, and again, what is AI? AI is a lot of different things. But AI is predictive forecasting of markets. Pretty much all of us now these days are used to using maps and GPS as we drive. That is AI. Um, there's so many things, the way that it's embedded into our daily life that we don't even realize is AI, all the way to surveillance and facial recognition. And of course, the large language models like ChatGPT. So the promises of AI ultimately is that AI will allow humanity to compress, as we heard, or to speed up the rate of progress. But what are the perils of AI? And here I'm not even going to get into the huge talk about the absolute doom and end of humanity as we are overtaken by AI geniuses and robots. I'm not going to go there because that itself is a fraught ideology that's nestled within something much deeper. What I'm concerned about, and I think many of us are concerned about, are the actual real and present perils of AI that are realities happening right now on the ground. And that, of course, is resource extraction, ecological devastation, and climate warming. It is war and the means and methods of war. It is transnational imperialism of labor, which includes not only things like extracting minerals, but also labeling and organizing AI models. And that is work that's primarily done in the global South. It includes surveillance capitalism and algorithmic control of so many things in our daily life, from the ways that people can access or not access their healthcare, to insurance, to, of course, the social media that affects pretty much the way that most people get news these days. It exacerbates existing inequalities in many ways through algorithms. And then techno-fascism and the erosion of democracy. So just big, broad blanket perils. Then we're looking at economics with the hyper consolidation of money and power, which we see and which we've been seeing, especially since the pandemic, in the hands of a few elite billionaires. Automation and loss of livelihoods is a real possibility that's already happening on a small scale. And economic destabilization because apparently the last 2 quarters of the US economy, there was more investment in AI than there was consumer spending across the board. So basically, all of the eggs are in the basket of AI, not only in the United States, but increasingly around the world. AI is like the golden ticket to the utopia that we had always, somebody or another, maybe not we all, had hoped for. Then we have the wholesale theft of intellectual property and human creativity as AI models like ChatGPT and others basically hoover up everything that any of us have ever put on the internet, including our thoughts, our writing, our artwork, and so on. There's the very real atrophy of collective imagination and attention, which we'll be speaking to, as this is about the war against the imagination, and the diminishment of actual human capacities and skills, including, the attention span, as we mentioned, is a very important piece of this. And finally, there's kind of the spiritual and social connection, the loss of connection with reality, basically, with the earth, with anything that's not on a screen, and the social isolation of relating so deeply with, say, chatbots and the like. The 24/7 mode of life and the eclipse of rhythmic time that includes daily rhythms of night and day. It includes the seasonal rhythms and the larger wheel of the year. And of course, poor physical health, actual psychosis, which has been happening increasingly through people's relationships with chatbots, and even death in the case of minors that had been talking to chatbots and were encouraged to take their lives. So Karen House says the empires of AI are not engaged in the same overt violence and brutality that marked basically the history of colonialism, and that is debatable. But they too seize and extract precious resources to feed their vision of artificial intelligence. The work of artists and writers, the data of countless individuals posting about their experiences and observations online, the land, energy, and water required to house and run massive data centers and supercomputers. So what is the true cost of AI? I think is really what we need to be asking as societies and communities. What are the inner and outer resources that go into building and sustaining AI systems? The inner being imagination, creativity, time and our relationship with it, space and our relationship with physical space and the distances between us, our human relationships and our relationship to the beyond human, our own relationship with rest and our nervous systems, and outer resources, of course, being land, minerals, fossil fuels, and fracking, water, electricity, nuclear, and human bodies. So ultimately, these inner and outer resources are our shared commons. There's a lot here, and I'll just kind of bullet that, you know, I am and we are going to be addressing the empires of AI, or we could say AI as the newest tool of empire. And specifically, what I'm talking about is this approach to AI, because perhaps um, some of us might find useful and important applications for this technology. But this is an approach which is called scale at all odds. Large language models that are fed with the whole internet, massive supercomputers the size of dozens or hundreds of football fields. It is, it is an agenda with a very specific trajectory. And I don't think that many or most of us actually want to go there. Authoritarian measures are a hallmark of the current empires of AI. In December, Trump signed an executive order blocking any US states to be able to regulate AI because we need to, quote, win the race for artificial intelligence. Um, and generally in empire, losses get socialized, gains get privatized is a way that somebody on a Reddit thread put it really beautifully, which is that we as communities bear the brunt of any of the losses. The gains are what the billionaires get, of course. And things like WorldCoin, which is Sam Altman's new tech cryptocurrency, and others are another means to continue to privatize our commonwealth. Resource imperialism, of course, is something we don't have the ability to get into completely here, but the global North's plunder of the global South and what I'm calling the indigenous North here, i.e. this country, Canada and Greenland, and Russian territories, is seeing a reprise, as one writer put it, for the extraction of rare minerals to produce AI chips and batteries, along with vast amounts of labor. Geopolitics as a whole are being formed around AI advancement needs. There was recently the Pax Silica Pact with 10 nations, including India, European nations, Japan, Korea, South Korea, and the United States, of course. Trump had another executive order to increase American mineral production and bypass any public comment periods, bypass the requirement to consult with tribal nations at all in order to speed, kind of rapid fire approve these mining and remining projects on federal lands and likely other lands across the United States. And ultimately, the empire is something that seeps into, again, our everyday lives, the way that we think, the way that we interact with reality, as algorithms, as I mentioned before, really determine so much about our lives already. And 72% of US teenagers report having used AI for companionship, and 1 in 5 of them report having a deep mutual connection to a chatbot. So I'm gonna kind of move through this in just like 3 minutes, but part of what I really want us to look here at tonight is what are the theologies or the theologies underlying, undergirding AI systems and their rollout. One of the things that Cory Doctorow talks about is something called TINA, which apparently Margaret Thatcher popularized, which is, this refrain we often hear, which is there's just no other way, it's inevitable. Then we need to look back, as far back as the enclosure of the commons in Europe and kind of the precedent that anything that was common now belongs to the elite. The doctrine of manifest destiny, of course, the colonial mandate to be able to seize lands and peoples in order for the benefit, again, of a privileged elite. What I call the British East India Company playbook, I think, is a really useful lens to look at how empire is working. We have Locke and the general idea of a productivity economy where everything now we see, we could translate that to optimization. Everything has to be optimized. Everything has to be faster, better, you know? And does it though, really? Like, where did that idea come from? Really important to the tech billionaires in this movement as a whole is the science fiction that was created really in the World War II era in the United States. Um, and if we look at those times, they really were an escape from the difficulty of what was, as well as a way to kind of reckon with the forces of imperialism at the time. And then finally, salvation, and what I'm going to ask Tiakasin to speak more about this later, is basically that AI, or substitute AI for something else, basically will figure it all out for us. So both predictive and generative AI are status quo machines, truly excellent at reproducing existing conditions and shaping the future in the image of the racist, sexist, ableist, transphobic past. Laura Klein and Catherine D'Ignazio. And that kind of sums it up a lot. We don't have time to look at all these slides in this presentation at length, but I'll just say that I think it's really important that we begin to bring AI back to Earth, because we have a notion we've been sold that it's all in the cloud, and the cloud is some kind of very pristine thing out there. But indeed, the AI revolution runs on rocks, on minerals, on the extraction of elements, and that this is toxic for rivers, soil, and human beings and wildlife. There's a lot about data centers we could get in, but I'll just pick a couple of these to say that nearly 60% of the over 1,000 largest data centers in the world are outside of the US. And nearly 600 are being planned right now globally. 2/3 of the ones that exist are in water scarce regions. In Ireland, data centers consume more than 20% of the country's electricity, and data centers are draining aquifers in places like Chile and Mexico. And there's so much out there now about this that it's like, to not know this by this point, one really has to be looking away from what is. So data centers will account for nearly half of US electricity demand growth by 2030, but that's a very hypothetical. It could be more than that for all we know. Meta's Hyperion data center in Louisiana is slated to be the size of Manhattan Island and will need at least 3 brand new fossil fuel powered plants to operate it. There's a real push for nuclear. Microsoft has a contract to open 3 Mile Nuclear Island facility in Pennsylvania, which was shut down because of a reaction years ago. And finally, I'll just say that the madness goes so far as to, of course, that tech firms are exploring the possibility of actual solar-powered data centers in space. And the more pushback they get from human beings on the ground in Earth, the more they'll try and, of course, colonize out of Earth. There is resistance to this, a map that just shows that there's a lot happening. Go back that for a second, to push against AI center development in the United States and elsewhere. And 200 groups called for a nationwide moratorium just a couple months ago. And finally, I want to just point to the military use of AI, because again, this is a war against the imagination, but also a war at many scales. So important for us in the US and also elsewhere is that ICE has been partnering with Palantir Technologies since 2013, but that really amped up since the Trump administration. They have a prototype platform called Immigration OS, which is tracking, so-called illegal immigrants and deporting them. Israel's use of Palantir really scaled up in 2023 as part of its genocide in Gaza. And Gaza is a kind of test ground for technologies that are then imported at scale into the United States, including drones that are contracted with 800 US law enforcement and security agencies. Um, and finally, a lot of these tech companies are in bed with the US government. And Anthropic, that the controversy I mentioned earlier, which just was labeled as woke AI by Secretary Pete Hegseth in the Trump administration, basically this is the same guy I've been quoting, Dario Amodei. They have actually a commitment to, quote, ensure that their AI technology is not used for mass domestic surveillance or for autonomous weapons systems without human oversight. Now, there's a lot, I think the vast majority, I don't agree with this person at all on, but that this is kind of a line in the sand is a good thing. So the US government is currently threatening to in some way enforce that they be able to use the technology uh, for, quote, any and all lawful uses. This came out because it was somehow revealed that the Maduro abduction in Venezuela happened through the use of the Claude AI system, which is Anthropic system. So, and as it says here, that some say that AI systems are the new. I'm going to go back to that. The new Manhattan Project of the Pentagon in this century, and it is that dangerous and that powerful. So, what does the future look like in AI? Some images that the cloud is actually Earth-based. This is a lithium mine in Chile. Lithium is used for batteries. Cobalt also used for batteries. This is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where hundreds of thousands of people work in artisanal mines. This is in Myanmar, happening right now. Satellite view of a rare earth mineral mine before and after. And more Myanmar, a huge plastic pool, chemicals. And ultimately, what are the weapons in this war against the imagination if we have a chance at fighting it? This I found comedic. They said they stared too long and too much. Like, part of the weapon is, I think, how our attention is seized and where it is put to. So in Buddhism and in the Indian traditions, we have something called manomaya, or mind made. And Joanna Macy has a beautiful parable of this that was shared to her by Tibetan monks that I highly recommend listening to. Um, but where essentially they say that the weaponry of the machine or empire is ultimately mind made. All of these technologies came from the minds of human beings. However, and we must remember that it's illusion, or it would be Maya, to assume that they're only in the mind or they're only in the cloud, because it takes earth, it takes water and mineral in order to power and create these ideas. And lastly, we'll be exploring what is natural intelligence. Not natural intelligence, which now has become a book about how businesses can better be like nature and make more money. I almost didn't want to use the term NI because it's already a captured term, but because perhaps we can find another languaging for this. But what is an intelligence that is not artificial as a tool for us to push back? And perhaps there are uses for AI to help human beings, to help human health in very limited ways. For example, in New Zealand, there was a group of indigenous-led Maori researchers that created a small-scale model to help them relearn their language. There was also another tool co-designed with grassroots feminist activists across the Americas to track articles and incidences of femicide. So those are just two um, examples that I found that kind of point towards a feminist, anti-colonial, pluralist, and democratic use of AI, but with very small data sets for very specific tasks and guided by the communities themselves. But there has to be an ability to opt out and to refuse these technologies altogether if they don't serve the people's needs. And lastly, we come to, countering AI with Earth-based intelligences. What are the fugitive forces that already exist to help us counter, subvert, and challenge the assault on collective imagination? And I'll leave us with this, which is the inquiry of if we are going to resist the negative and uh, assault and extractive seizure of our inner and outer resources by AI systems and the billionaires that design and run them, then what is our body and mind and ultimately nervous system calibrated to? Is it calibrated to the theologies of empire and the promises of a technocratic, utopian future, or is it calibrated to the elements and the resources of Earth? So that is what I want to offer you as an entry point, as a beginning. And then we're going to stop this share and open up this conversation. And before we jump right in, I just want to give you a couple of minutes to sit back and if you have a writing utensil, technology, and paper, to actually write some notes, to write some thoughts, to write questions that you may have. And you're also welcome to write in the chat. I'm really curious to hear, particularly, this is the first question we'll be looking at, is what is intelligence to you? Welcome you all. I want to begin by asking you each this question, and then I have some specific questions for each of you and kind of that arc that we walked through. Tiakasan, I would love for you to speak on what is intelligence and wherever that takes you.
Well, thank you. Teokasi chetanzi wiki bahami chaje oyate hokai chake leum kipiki ohewashtelo. Just to clear the air there for me, I'd like to understand that I'm speaking this foreign language in this logic of the Western mind. It's just very foreign to me to talk in binary format and to put everything into a narrow stream rather than the availability of the whole, a spatialness, which holds intelligence. And so intelligence to us is more of a consciousness. We have a word that we say wakan. Wakan basically means, in English, it would take, make it subjective and objectified. So we say wakan, which means wa is purity, ka is energy. So if our language, which I just spoke to you in, is more like energy, it describes energy and our availability to it, or even our accessibility to speaking that. But this consciousness, this intelligence comes from these elements that we live with, which you all say we live on Earth. So this intelligence comes from the four elements, basic four elements, and those which wamakashka, those who live on the surface, I would say. And so in this relationship of mitakoyo yasi, which is really E equals MC squared and beyond, and in translation, we are in contact consciously with all. So everything is a mystery. And the intelligent thing that I can say about this is that a lot of indigenous peoples across the planet are not trying to solve the mystery. But you see the way the Western is, they're trying to solve the God gene. They're trying to solve the mystery, and it's making people crazy. And this is a result of that is this artificial intelligence, which, as you mentioned, is not really an intelligence at all. It's a stab in the dark, and it's almost an automatic or a go-to, a default to try to defend that because the language that I'm speaking to you now in has a lot of conflict and antagonism in the same sentence. In other words, you have to prove you're right. Everything is about proof and expertise. And if you didn't read it, it's not true. But we can go down back to the basics of the earth does not lie. And if our consciousness is clear with earth, that's the truest intelligence. And it takes a lot to say that in what I was told by my mother, who was 90 years old at the time, she said that we could not speak Lakota, my language this language of Lakota, without intuition. Now, where does intuition come from? And it's everywhere. And if we are into the temporality of everything, we're not going to understand spatiality because we want to understand what's in that atom and beyond that and beyond that and beyond, because there's really not a word for nothing. There's always something. There's no such thing as nothing. So we see, that these so-called dimensions in English are available. And if we are using our energy properly with the elemental consciousnesses I described to you, then we have more accessibility to what a plant is saying, to what a rock is saying, what that star is saying, how you're feeling about this energy, that energy. And know you talk about a binary of positive and negative energy, when it's really about energy cannot be created or destroyed. And we don't notice the changes of it. I think we are behind or ahead. If I use time concepts, we're never balanced because we're either in the future, which technology has taken us away from the present, and but also we're running away from the past. So our language is such that we become very present phobic, because if you listen to it in intelligence from the West, there is always about the future and never and running from the past. So the balance of these consciousnesses, the intelligences, at this language becomes more earth-based. So the intelligence is different because earth knows you better than you know earth, basically. And intelligence, AI, comes from humans. And AI can never keep pace with earth, ever. So that's my idea about what intelligence is.
Okay. Kumbwa, turning to you, if you would like to add to that what Jakasin has shared, and moving toward not only what is intelligence, but how is intelligence as it's being offered here through Earth juxtaposed with an artificial intelligence.
The first word that came to mind, and I'll probably say heart too, when you said what is intelligence, was balance. In the Dagara cosmology from West Africa, one of the things we look at, particularly within the medicine wheel, as shared with us by Malidoma Some, who's now an ancestor, is balance between, for us, the five elements. And for us, that is an intelligence. Our cosmovision, our cosmology is a not only a template, but a process, a material reality, a lens for us to process all of the intuitive, subtle, and powerful energies of the universe. And particularly through not only the five elements that we um, contextualize the world in, but also through the ancestors, through spirit directly. So when I hear that word intelligence, I think about, of course, multiple intelligences. What are the 10 to 20 to 100 to 1,000 to 3,062 ways that we can be in knowing of anything? And when I come back to the word balance, I'm coming back at some level to a sense of functionality, you know, that, and it reminds me of this story that the colonial, Western colonial thought has about, and I'll just say cavemen, right? Because they tell all these stories about ancient people. And I remember a few documentaries that, said, um, that, yeah, we've spoken grunts and different things like whatever, kind of these stories about really the lack of intelligence of humans at the time, or hominids at the time. And, I think about it, I gave it a lot of thought. Something hit me right off, and that's my intuition. I'm not a student or teacher of grand scale anthropology or anything like that, but there's something about the human condition that when we talk about humans and intelligence, there has to be something more than just the mind-based conception. And I think there's a little bit of resonance, if I dare say, with what Tiokasin has said already, but that if we were only dependent upon a mind based cognitive set of values and data, we wouldn't be here. We would not be here. We would have been eaten by all the saber-toothed tigers that ever were. We would walk into the forest to look for something to eat, and we would just be consumed. We wouldn't have gotten to the place of fire. We wouldn't have gotten to the place of understanding ourselves and our bodies. We wouldn't have any sense of understanding what the moon is doing, what the sun is doing, what the subtle energies of the earth are doing, if we did not have built within our system of humanity a way of understanding subtle energies, a way of having an informed intimacy about our environments, a way of being able to understand the wind, to understand the presence of other beings and other bodies, to understand, if you will, the saber-toothed tiger on much more of an understanding than it is just a a stronger, stealthier being that would eat us. I think again this Western modality of trying to understand what is smart or what intelligence does not even begin to come close to the deep ways of knowing that is inherent in the human body, mind, spirit. And I'm led to that always because we are multi-dimensional beings. And yes, I'll agree wholeheartedly with Tiokasin, as I've been known to do in many ways, that um, that just to have this limitation of that English is not the best way to even encapsulate this intelligence. I remember it just recently on a conversation with the New England Hoodoo Society that is resurrecting some of the indigenous based, earth based knowings and healings that African people on Turtle Island and other places have developed that are coming from our ancestral ways of knowing. And one of the things that I was telling them about was, again, in agreement and maybe in addition to what Tiokasin has been saying, I was talking about the nature element, and that there's a sense of balance that nature is always having, but there's a sense of calculation that I call multi-point balance. And I will always assert that in a square yard of forest, there are many more calculations and processes going on, you know, at say room temperature, then I don't think any data center can be able to match. There is more going on there. So when you look at the whole forest, whether it be all the forests that are actually getting cut down in the Democratic Republic of Congo or in the Amazon or in other places, we are taking away the amazing sense of calculations and balance. And I have to come back to balance with all of this because we know when indigenous people look at particular concepts and spaces and challenges, we're looking at what is the balance we need to come to. What is the balance that we need to understand? What are the subtle energies that we need to understand? What are the larger conceptions of life that we have understood over time? And I always say that the indigenous knowledge network on the earth is the longest running longitudinal peer reviewed system that we'll ever have. No set of Harvards and Yales and whatever it is can ever match that. Likewise, no system set up by these Harvards and Yales and Princeton, based in the silica networks, and that's something Malidoma talked about, that our computers are all set up on stone. It is rock.
I'm going to pause you on that because I want
Yeah.
to come back and ask you to speak on that more.
Okay, fair enough. But yes, so again, if I'm wrapping up, and which is difficult for a water clan person to do, because we're always going to be flowing over that waterfall. But to to slow down my flow right now, again, coming back around to it, that word that comes up for me is balance, and that's not what AI is about. But that has always been what humans are about. That's always been what the earth is about. The waters have been about balance.
Mm-hmm.
That's intelligence to me.
Thank you. Beautiful. And Monica, coming to you on what's coming through to share on what is intelligence. And perhaps I think we're answering a question of what is natural intelligence? What is intelligence and how does it perhaps, if this calls to you, connect us as humans?
Yeah. Well, because Ukumba spoke to the waters, I want to welcome all the elements that are actually here, already present with us and amongst us. And just maybe even now, if we just take a second to just close our eyes if you want to, or just like sense who's in the circle with us. Who is in the circle with us? And is there anyone you want to call who maybe you can't see, but your heart knows they need to be here with us? So just like a second to just like expand our circle, right? And then what we're doing right now is, I think, we're just like using the intelligence of a heart to just make sense of how belonging works, how balance works, right? Like this beautiful word that Akumba offered to us. And yeah, and it's a very different way of moving into the world. And we all know this, right? Like I think it's something very natural to us. We come to the earth with this way of moving already. It may get stolen by all these other systems, right? Like that we're forced to participate in, but it's here, it's innate, it's part of us already, right? Like we already know how to connect with that sense of it's sort of like an interconnected sense of whole, right? Like, and again, since we're speaking in this language, in this colonial language, right, like where we can only like grasp at these concepts, right? Like we can only use our own bodies, beings, cells, memories, everything that we are, right? Like all the energy streams that brought us here and that are taking us forward, left, right, like we can only use all the resources that are already in us to connect to something that is so ineffable, right? But it's here. So first of all, like it's here. We're moving in intelligence, right? Like we're in this field, right? Like the field is intelligent. And again, maybe the question isn't like what is, right? But maybe the question is, how is intelligence moving through you, right? Like, how is intelligence moving through us? How is intelligence moving through the rocks? And how is intelligence moving through? Well, I have a cat companion here. I live with her, and she teaches me every day about, like again, like her way of like again, getting a sense of life, right? Like that's what it is. It's this contact with life. And I think this is where, again, I think for me, and that was such a great presentation you did, Pooja, right? Like just like laying bare all the ways in which this industry has grown, right? And it's sort of like here with us right now. But something they do so savvily is they manipulate us through language, right? So even the word intelligence is meant to manipulate us into seeing a quality in these systems which they actually don't participate in, which is a relationship with life. They don't have a relationship with life, right? But and again, and like Pooja again, I mean, it's here with us. So I'm drawn to trying to understand what is going on in the minds of these people also. And something that I also notice is that there are a lot of dissenting voices, even amongst AI researchers, even amongst computer scientists. A lot of people have been like really trying to theorize, think, propose alternative frameworks about what is happening and just pushing back, like, hey, or asking, slow down, asking, saying, pause. So I think this idea, I can't remember where I read it. It might have been in an article by Timnit Gebru and Emil Torres. They talk about intelligence as actually having a deep connection, at least the way it's brought together. This phrase, right, like artificial intelligence, which is a phrase that was coined in the 1950s, right, like by this John McCarthy, who was basically trying to raise money for research. He was trying to attract interest, right? Like, so it's got this like, it's got a hook there, right? Like, so notice the hook. So they're building in this hook, and they're connecting this hook to this way of thinking about intelligence that came into being in the 1920s, which links it to the eugenics movement, and which links it to white supremacy, essentially, right? Like, which says, okay, so colonialism, that's what it is, right? Like certain people or certain groups of people are intelligent and certain groups of people are less intelligent, right? So again, like this idea, why do we need this machinic, like this aggregation, this accumulation? We like, because we're not enough. Human beings are not enough, or at least some classes of human beings are not enough. I think there are certain people amongst who are trying to build and really invest in these technologies who believe no humans are enough, no humans matter. And of course, I mean, along with that, Earth doesn't matter, right? Nature doesn't matter. And there's certain people, certain other AI investors who think, well, some don't matter. Maybe some do matter. Maybe it's worth keeping some. So there's of course like competing things there. But yeah, like I think it's really it's this it's propaganda essentially, like even like this like artificial intelligence, right? Like when it comes into play over there, right? But let's like when we sweep that aside, when we put that aside, and this phrase natural intelligence, right? Like when we try to again, like try to connect, and I think it's again, it's something we need to connect with, right? Like it's something we need to like, oh, it's here already, right? It's here. We're in it, right? Like so then how do we awaken ourselves to be present to it? Which is, I think, a question that we're asking today.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the piecing together of this construction to assign intelligence to something that can never embody it. I want to now interrogate this, why it is, in fact, as Monica was saying, that human beings are so compelled to create these systems that annihilate us, not in some future landscape as robots, but in the here and now, annihilating our hearts and minds and ecosystems. Why is it that we're so drawn? And so I do have a specific piece of that I'm drawn to ask each of you. And Kumbla, since you were starting to speak about this earlier, I often think about how Malidoma Somé talked about, and the Dagra speak about, that Western colonial civilization is a culture of restlessness,
Mm.
that the whole system is predicated on this lack of rest and this continual, as Tiakosin was saying, running from the past. And that
Mhm.
moreover, Western colonial society is a fire culture. So
Mhm.
I would love you to share some words about what does it mean. I've been thinking a lot about the balance of fire and water. And in the East Asian medicine system, they would say, yang and yin. In our tradition, we would say purusha and prakriti, and the balance of fire and water ultimately, and all the elements. So I'm curious for you to share about what are the markers of a hyper fire or a fire deranged culture of
Mm.
modernity, and how does it need to continually extract water and mineral and nature in order to burn.
Mhm.
Um, and underlying that, what is this culture of restlessness that propels it on, that propels us to want to create an artificial intelligence?
Yeah, thank you for that. I immediately want to connect restlessness with homelessness. Um, and I want to look at that beyond what we know as unhoused human beings in what is so called the greatest country in the world or the greatest society in the world, Western, modern thinking, based in the Christian imperialist idea, of the doctrine of discovery, has done the best any human has ever done. All right, so that's just my little jab there, but or big one. But I think the homelessness is a big piece of this, and I want to add a bit to like what you said about why are humans so tied up with this thing that kind of leads us to our own demise. And I always want to add to that it is not humans that are doing that. There are people that are tied up to a particular ideological way of thinking and not feeling that causes this situation. I've had any number of conversations, short or long, of people who are assigning the pathologies of colonial and oppressive power to the people in general. And I'm like, wait, no, that's a way for you to look innocent in the process and to dodge accountability, which we have to come back to the energetic harm that Europe did to Europe that created the doctrine of discovery, that it had to find sustenance in other places and to dehumanize the people through terra nullius, that said, the land is empty because there are no Christians on it, you know, which, yeah, was true. because it was globalized through violence, and now it's everywhere. But I think that again, there is that restlessness, but it has to do with the homelessness that Europeans created for themselves.
Yeah.
As
Enclosure is part of that too. Just putting that in there.
closure.
Enclosure of those homelands.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is, a captivity, of sorts. And so yes, this what I call an anti-culture of, based in the doctrine of discovery and extractivism, which AI is. It's tremendously extractive, and theft, is yes, very fire-based. And fire says, it feeds on complexity. It wants to consume. Fire wants to consume. If you give it, that space, it will take up the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It will jump from space to find things that it can consume. One of the first things that happened um, on at least Turtle Island and in many places that Europe colonized was that the trees disappeared because they had already deforested Europe. So lumber was not the only trade. Obviously, the trade in bodies, which did start with indigenous people of Turtle Island and the surrounding areas, but then was metastasized into the African experience of chattel enslavement. But yes, that fire imbalance is always looking for fuel, is always looking to do something, and not be concerned, as water teaches us in its connection to emotion and grief, how we feel about it. It takes us off of the earth. It is always in grounding us, so we don't have a sense of wait a minute, where is home for us? And what is that about? How are we now feeling disconnected from our earth base, which is always where our spirituality comes from? And again, why the Inuit have what 200 words for snow. The cicada in the in Congo don't have 200 words for snow. There's a reason for that. you know and it sounds simplistic, but we have to understand that that's where our intelligences come from. And again, I'm reminded of that, through Monica's words and from Tiokasin's words about our sensing of all the things around us. And one of the things that helps us sense is our connection to water, which is a downward pointing energy, and fire is a rising energy. And so a balance between that helps us to understand, yes, we need to get certain things done. There may be certain ways we need to um, consume things around us. It might be animals, it might be trees, it might be plants, it might be earth in which we want to build a home or a village. But we have to, through the intelligence and knowing what the balance is between fire and water and the other elements, that we need to do it a certain way. We cannot get rid of all the forests because we just want to build a whole bunch of houses. We cannot take all of the stone out of a certain place because the earth put the stone there because it needed the stone there. Now, if we don't have an intelligent way, which again to me would be a balanced and compassionate way, we have to be compassionate with the earth as it always is with us, and with the waters. We will then lose that balance, and we will be caught up in this consumptive, fire-based, constant consumption, constant production of things. You know, and I always think about it. It's funny, it's very pedestrian. But when I go into a store and there's a seasonal aisle, my first thought, everything in this aisle right now is going to end up in a landfill in 6 months. But that's capitalism. That's fire. We can make so many things. Look at what we can make. We are, one of the prides of capitalists in Western societies, look at what we can make. But on the other side of it, and sometimes, in a very, and I'll call it a pedestrian way, I call it, if I may, the ass end of all of this. What comes out of the other end? We're not if we are, indigenous and other, earth-based people, we do look at that. We do look at all of these processes. What is coming out the other end? We don't need all of these things. We're not going to create them. So, in this fire-based system that says produce, produce, consume, consume, water asks us to slow down. Water asks us to check our feelings. not only for ourselves, but what's the earth going through? What is the stone, the mountains going through? What is nature going through? And how do we have to rebalance intelligence balance? How do we rebalance our relationships so that the relationships of all the elements can do what they're supposed to do without our interference, with our being with them in radical compassion for all that is?
Thank you. And I wonder if, just in a few sentences, could you speak on what you were going to say earlier about Melodoma speaking to the silicon? The silicon.
Yes, and I'll try to keep it to those few words. One of the things I remember he said is we were talking about, yes, kusir, the mineral element, and he reminded us that all the computer memory systems are based on silica. That's why we call it Silicon Valley. So literally, we're using stone to remember things, in the computer itself. And that's what we do. Part of our medicine in the Dogra system is that stone and bones, the bones in our body are what holds the deep memories of our ancestry, of our relationships to the earth. It's knowledge beyond knowing. When we say, "Oh, I feel that in my bones," somebody says something, and Dogra people will be like, "Oh, oof, I get that. I know, I've been knowing that," that kind of thing. But we feel it in our body in a very embodied, powerful way. So yes, that AI is built on rocks makes sense, but we knew that one of our rituals is that we can connect to stone and we download or upload our knowledge into stones, our personal information, but we can share that by tapping the stones together and sharing our deep knowing with each other. That's one of the ways villages stay in balance in the Dagara world, by doing rituals like that, uploading and downloading the information. So yeah, the silica, the rocks, the stones, the bones, the metal are very connected to our concept of deep ancestral long-term earth memory.
Beautiful. Thank you. Tiakas, turning back to you, you may have some things to say about all this that was shared. And my specific inquiry to you is I would love you to speak about, in terms of, why colonizer mentality continues to consume. You often use, I'm going to read a little line of something you shared relatively recently, which is, that AI is another altar of religiosity and salvation point mentality from a dry well of good intentions. And I would love you to speak more about that, particularly what is it that you mean by salvation point mentality?
Okay, thank you for the few words here. Let's take it back to the beginning here, where I often refer to someone that is honorable mention with the Native people, and he comes from the Jewish people of Germany, basically Einstein, and he said the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. So I'll go with that. So creating what that society says, that you will have created something that you can no longer control. And that's presently what's going on. We don't know how to control it. So when I talk about salvation point mentality here, I'm standing on the shore, the view from the shore, and I'm seeing these ships coming. And these ships are bringing laws and the religions or faiths, and they have no experience with the land when they get here. And Okumba alluded to before about abusing the earth this way. And when I'm talking about where's the language that is missing, where was that schism that happened when they landed? And they were running from something that happened there in Europe. They brought it over here, and it's gone from east coast to coast now, and they're looking for something, a greater intelligence, something that is out there. But what has happened is this slavier mentality to give technology that place on a pedestal. That technology is going to save us, but make us slaves at the same time. That's why I say slavier mentality. And it's harnessed by what I call the rest of us. We could say, I could say, because I've been involved with it and I've been able to speak my language, especially, is this institutional silencing. We're learning to silence ourselves and to silence others who speak up and speak out about what happened here in Turtle Island, North America, and South America. And then we speak up about, especially if it's about imperial terms or about the destruction of Earth through the abuse of its conscious elements, which rest on Western rationale that AI is the next thingified technology. We can control it. It's upheld in unseen colonization of the mind. So we have to understand that this rationale, one becomes like reflexive to authority, authoritative intellectualism, I guess I'd call it, instead of being rooted in understanding or absolute understanding and living in natural laws. So AI versus OI, which is original instructions. It's not, you can say natural intelligence, but it's original instructions. It wants to rid people of their consciousness about what's really going on, levels of consciousness, and put us into a conscience that something is wrong or something is not right. And it's with materialism, because materialism masquerades, we controlled the country, we control other people, and it's an intelligent way to do it if we do it through a slavier technology like AI. It's again repeating this binary pattern of negative and positive. And so there's no consequential thinking behind it except give it up to the savior. And so we must put all our energy into that. And then we hope something will come out good, because there's no requirement. And those people who don't accept AI, you see, they're doing what's required to live. And that's in communication with Earth. And Earth is non-material, okay? We've been convinced since Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates to think this way. We're talking thousands of years. And that came over, and it's in violation of Earth's natural right to exist. So much so that we're giving Earth rights. It's the other way around, where Earth gives us right and privilege to live here. But what the progenitors of technology, they keep rationalizing this use of water, not as water, but water is life, actually. It's not a commodity in a filter, or even a lifeless wetness, which is becoming. So you see, view from the shore, watching the ships coming, another way of life. And it's actually not conducive to living with Earth, but coming here looking for that savior, the land. If I own this like a king, then I'll be okay, I'll be secure. But this is what's happening here. And I think that part of this is the experience with the land is not happening. We haven't experienced the land to understand what is good for us. So we're going on with the old way of thinking that comes from the old world, which, by the way, this is not the new world to us as Native people. This is the old world. And in that's the land. If you think the Earth is going to save us, it's true, because we can't save Earth because of the way we're behaving. And I hope that addresses something. And I'm sorry, I'm just
No,
speaking.
it's all threading through. Thank you.
Yeah.
Monica. turning to you again, continuing to weave this thread of why it is that these systems do what they do. As Tiokanson spoke, as he stands on the shore watching the ships come in, and Kambo also said there's a restlessness that comes from not knowing home, that ultimately we're speaking to a trauma that was experienced some thousands of years back and then has been replicated here on these lands and then subsequently all of the lands on Earth. This process is almost like a infective process of passing down, passing on trauma. I'm curious what comes through to share about this process of trauma and how it relates to the seizure of the imagination and creativity. As an artist, as a poet, I've really appreciated your words about AI capturing our creative sovereignty, as well as why it is that you opt out of choosing the convenience or the efficiency of drafting an email or a paper. So yeah, I guess I'm curious to continue weaving this thread of the trauma that kind of originates this desire to capture imagination and creativity. Like how is that connected? Does that make sense? Capture.
So many threads there, right? Yeah, and yeah, they are all connected. When just to go back a little bit, like for me, and yeah, this is something that has happened really all over the globe, and it's really happening all over the globe, right? Like, so it's something, yeah, we're all affected by it. And I say this, and I'm really thinking of like, yeah, how all the different ways in which we're all affected by it. But for me, something that um, I was tracking within myself. I started tracking within myself a few years ago, and of course, it's an ongoing process, right? Like it doesn't stop. Is the colonial split between sacred and secular, which was ideologically sort of like handed over to South Asia, to India, uh, when as part of the colonial legacy, right? So, but it happened even before that, because I don't think I'm wanting religion and sacred to be looped in together. For me, sacred is something very different from religion, right? Like, and again, India has its own articulations of organized religion, which are hugely problematic. But the that split in consciousness, right? Like, so the world, and I think Tiokasin was talking about like the earth turned secular, right? Like the earth turned material, the earth turned dead matter in some ways. So going back again also to fire, which Ukumba was talking about, right? And I don't know if fire itself is the problem, right? But it's fire that is desacralized, that has been desecrated, right? Like, and removed, cut off, like it's roots that have been cut off from that sacred interconnection. Like that's when um, this happens. And it's also not, I don't think it's actually a coincidence that these chips, computer chips, and everything that, I mean, I'm looking at my laptop screen right now, and through it, I'm looking at y'all, right? Like, so this is the mineral element in the Dagra cosmology, of course, right? Like bones and stones, as Akumba was talking about. And I don't think this is a coincidence at all. Because in some ways, like I was talking about the language manipulation, right? So there is some sort of like a perceptual manipulation that is a part of this thing, which is, of course, like the metaphysical level, right? Like it is, they want us to see it as magic. And they are maybe drawing on some old, I'll just say it like, because I think it like, it's some kind of like an old sorcery, right? Like, so they create this perceptual disconnection, right? Like, and they create multiple structural, systemic, it's just passed on in multiple ways. It becomes, it lands in our psyche and it creates that trauma that Pooja you're referring to, right? And meanwhile, they're using these technologies to kind of like create these effects, these sorcery type effects, right? So I think like there is this kind of like again a wildness and manipulation. Again, we have to be aware, right? Like there is something going on there. But again, so for me, I guess I call this process healing the splits, which again, for me, Gloria Anzaldua's work has been very, very important, the Borderlands framework, right, in thinking about that. And I really do think that's something that we can do, and all of us get to do this work, right? Is really kind of like really pay attention to how we might be replicating some of the splits that we are fighting against outside in the world, right? Like really, and it means like we have to become honest. It means that we have to be, with ourselves. It means that yeah, it's psycho-spiritual work, right? Like that's what it is. And it's a work of like continuing to come back into balance and to right relationship, right? Like, and that the spiral, right? Like, and I think each iteration of ourselves will hopefully be like a little more able be able to speak back to the moment in a more coherent way, right? Like, and then something else will happen, and we'll be like, oh, I mean, I reacted in that way, or you catch something else, right? But yeah, I don't think the work of resistance can be just external. Like those, that has to be again, and that's where creativity comes in one way, because we are in some ways making ourselves. We are definitely creating ourselves. We are creating, our souls. We are creating who we are as humans. We're becoming more of why we came here. And again, like going back to what Malidoma would often say, but I mean, we're all here with a particular gift, right? And I think many cosmologies really hold this knowledge intact, right? Like we are here on earth with a particular purpose, right? And that purpose is awakened through everything that we uh, create in ourselves, right, in relationship with life, right? So that's the bigger creative process that's continually I think that inviting us to be a part of itself. And then of course, like some of us create through either words or language or sculptures, and there's all these ways in which I think, or through food or weaving, or so the creative process allows us to, I think, can allow us to tap into that cosmological creativity in like a smaller scale. We can really work with it with that consciousness. And yeah, and the other piece that I'll bring in here is the question of the notion of authority, and again, for me, as especially when I was in my 30s and early 40s, like through my 30s especially, the question of like voice was very important, right? And I think Tiokasin, you were speaking about the silencing, right? And again, like everything that had gone before that to silence me. And again, that process doesn't stop either, because again, the institutions, systems that want us to stay silent and complicit, they present themselves in new forms, right? So, but the question of voice and being able to kind of like really root ourselves in our knowing, root ourselves in our authority, right? Because again, like we're here on earth. She wants us to be here. She really does want us to be here, right? But also she doesn't want us to be kind of like just tiptoeing around, like disconnected from ourselves, right? Like that's fine. But and again, it's fine to kind of encounter those smaller, less like immature, childlike parts of ourselves, even as we continue to grow older in years, right? But the point is to kind of like become gather, like that sense of, again, this beautiful poem that Theo Cousin had written, Elder, right? Like we have to kind of like continue to gather this eldering energy within ourselves, right? Like we have to continue to kind of like get in touch with our own authority, which really, if we see through, again, like collapsing the binary, it's Earth's authority. It's the ancestors' authority. That's what it is, right? But again, if we are doing that, that means that we have to, again, like we need to be humble about this. The eye has to be like, again, it can't be like a human eye, right? Like we have to be willing to look at ourselves and yeah. So I can like go on about it, but I'll probably just pause here for now.
Thank you. There's a lot there.
Well,
There's so much.
I kind of like that thing that you said, Monica, that Earth is really the elder, and the other technology is taking us away from Earth and putting it above the shoulders and moving us away to another place. And we're forgetting the original instructions. So Earth is that elder. And if we refer not just we take religions away, what was there before religion? You know, and we could call it spirituality, but I'm speaking this language that's foreign here, and the ideas are very childlike because it's much more than the concepts that are coming through with subjective and objective in this language that I'm speaking to you now. And earth-based languages have that cosmology to understand what's going on with Earth. And Okumba said it earlier, uploading, downloading. We're doing that with Earth. And we say silicon, yeah, there's places where you can go still in the United States where we use quartz in our ceremonies to communicate. And so this is that enhancing the true original instructions of how we are supposed to be rather than just cerebral. And to us, we're not separate. There is no mind and body. The brain is one. And so we're separate, we're working with Earth, living with Earth, having peace with Earth, understanding Earth, because that's what we're given. Our bodies is made up of that, right? Not just one element like silicon. It's this narrative that we've experienced. I can say, kill the Indian and save the man. Well, now it's kill the being and save the human. That's the narrative that came on the ships, and that's what AI seems to be doing. Well, we can radically rationalize it and defend AI in such a way that it sounds good within the context of its usage and those who can afford to use it. And most of the world is not on computer. So, who are we to say all human beings need to do this? But thank you for that. I just had to let that go.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's so many threads. I mean, what you just said, that all humans, who are we to think? I mean, that's what the colonizer paradigm and embodied in these companies and these tech billionaires. They literally want everybody in the world to have access to AI. And the title of this being Countering AI with Earth-Based Natural Intelligence, or as Tiokasin has been saying, our original instructions, is what is circling here, is what's coming through over and again. And Monica, I wanted to touch in on something you said about creativity. I think one of the things I was feeling in what you were saying is that creativity that comes through us, which is Earth's intelligence or wisdom, creative essence she wants to create, she wants to express, she wants to be known through us, is that healing, is the way that the trauma healed, the trauma that was born in Europe, the trauma that came from hierarchical oppressions, the trauma that was brought in on the ships. But yet AI offers us like a carrot on a stick, as Takasun was saying, a slave your promise, which is, oh, we will make you feel that way. We will make you feel smart and at home and creative. We'll give you all the creative tools. We'll give you all the tools of connection. We'll give you the downloads. You can upload your consciousness and live forever. AI offers all of these in sort of a spell, as I was hearing you, Monica, say too, that there is we could say black magic, or there is a negative sorcery thing that has been playing through all along, which offers us our soul, really offers us wisdom of earth in a thing and in a way that is not that will never recreate that will never, I think we all agree, will never give us that. In my language, there's a word tripti, which means satisfaction. It's more than satisfaction, but it's like the full, essential knowing of belonging and at rightness or at oneness, the balance of all things. Like, it will never give us that, but it's so shiny and it's so novel that it tries to convince us and manipulate us to us that that is a thing. I think that's a thing that people, I find, have a really hard time discerning between what is real and what is not real, right? What is earth and what is not earth? When you can, so many people don't have experience of soil or water or rock or earth. They're looking at a screen to watch, a documentary about a far off earth that is consequently, unbeknownst to them, or maybe beknownst to them, being literally decimated, deforested, mined, rivers polluted, people put in slavery in order to create the mineral technology to power this device that we're watching it through. But I don't think people are able to, I think the hardest thing is that so many people aren't able to discern the real from the unreal, or to discern what is capture and what is freedom. And so my final kind of invitation or prompt is, as we look at countering the assault on our collective imagination, how do we, what forces, as you've each three have been saying, she moves through us, this intelligence, this force of resistance, of vitality. Actually, this imagination is not me, my mind, but it is earth that's moving through. And how do we counter that capture? How does a being, how does a community counter the capture of the imagination, the seductive, shiny, dangling thing that is AI? No, it's a big question, but I think so many folks are here because they care deeply, and they're wondering, how do I navigate this? How do we resist? So how do we resist? Anyone who feels called.
One of the things, if I may, that moves me and is when I learned that how AI is using water resources and abusing water resources. And yes, it's been said that there were data centers before AI showed up. And that's true, and we have to deal with that. We have to deal with that. One of the things that capitalism and colonialism is predicated on, because we can do a thing, we'll do a thing. Now, that's, what a 5-year-old learns to do. It's like, oh, look, I can jump off this chair into a box full of Legos. And for us, we're like, yeah, you can, but hey, let's think about that. Let's, before you jump into that box of Legos. And some of us are like, oh my God, that would hurt. Because we understand. And it's this, and I hate to say it this way, but it's a very juvenile, immature way of looking at the world. that we say we want to do these things and we don't have to. I think one of the things that we need to do to resist is to build up our intuitions, is to know that we have the ability to be intuitive and to build that up and to know that we have knowings that are far deeper, broader, and expansive than what our computers can do. One of the bravest students I ever met was he made this decision after I had taken them out. I was teaching video production, and I've taught media literacy for a long time. So we've talked about, you know, everything from robots to television to movies to cell phones. But you know, it was around the time that the documentary Planet Earth came out, which is some of the best cinematography of animals and nature that had existed up to that moment. So we go out, you know, I always take my students outside sometime. And I told them, okay, we're going to go out to this place near the school. There's going to be water there. There's going to be turtles. There's going to be heron and all that kind of stuff. And I said, okay, so be aware. You might see something. And so we get out there, and a second after we get close to the water, I tell everybody to be quiet, stop moving. There's a heron right there, you know. And when they saw this thing take wing, they were flabbergasted. They were like, "Oh my goodness, we had never seen this before." And this one student, very brave student, said to me, "I'm not sure if I should keep going in this video production direction because I'm making artifice out of what's real." He didn't use that word, but that's basically what he said. And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, you have all the pressure of your parents, of money, and all this kind of stuff, the department, the school, and here I am trying to take them, you know, opening up these doors that might take them away from it." But I really acknowledge his bravery at that moment to be able to say, "Oh my goodness, I see what's real now," and that's way more important than whatever planet Earth has to offer. Kudos to the footage. I think it's beautiful, but it's not real. And he learned it in a very powerful way that day. But he questioned it, his path, and thought, "Oh my goodness, I might have to think of something else." So that intuitive sense, that experiential sense, that having your feet on the ground, having the wind in your face, and sensing a great blue heron in the air, you can feel its wing beats, you know, when you're close enough. And we'd never get that from the screen. And he knew it in that moment. So to be able to build that sensual relationship with nature and the world is one of the things that we have to fight to keep, because we're being asked to step into artificial spaces all the time now, all the time.
Me too. Monica, would you like to share? And then I'm going to have Tiakasin close us out as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is such a difficult question because, of course, I see people around me, right, who are really in that. I mean, the word that's coming up is trap. Sorry, I don't mean to, diss anyone or, yeah. But it feels like it is an illusion or a hallucination, right? Like, and then so many people have bought into it, and I see this amongst my, again, colleagues, friends, da da da, family, all of that, right? And it's so yeah, how I think somewhere it has to be a choice, and it can be because you've learned you're learning something. I mean, in addition to what Kumba shared about, the real heron, right? Like really allowing that, but and I have these moments myself, right? Like when I've been, I don't know, sometimes I'm working on a phone or like on the screen, and suddenly, like, what happened to my time? Oh, and what happened to my brain, right? And then I kind of have to like reclaim my energy, right? Like, and reclaim myself like from that, right? And that requires a kind of like a sobering time. And then of course I may do certain energetic practices or grounding practices, right? So I think there's something about grounding and really allowing something that you brought up in your presentation earlier, like your nervous system, puja, right? Like allowing our nervous system to kind of like recalibrate to not being in this stimulated environment. And that requires choice. Again, that requires, again, like electing to do it. And I think that it also means that we have to kind of like, again, make a pact with our values, whatever our values are, right? And they may orient more towards, I think there is a book about like AI and um, resisting AI as an anti-fascist measure, right? Like, so it could be more coming from that paradigm. It could be coming from, let's say, a more earth-based paradigm, right? Like, or whatever other there are so many paradigms from which a critique of AI can actually emerge, has actually been emerging, right? So if you have values that are kind of, you know, emerging from any of these paradigms that are telling you, they're telling your intuition something's the matter, right? So really choosing to center yourselves in your values and then making those decisions, because again, it is being embedded in a very, very, like, it's an unwanted technology, and look, it's kind of like all around us, right? Like, so it has to be kind of like we have to make a choice to embed friction into our lives in some ways, right? So that can be another thing. And the other thing that, like, I think of also, and this links back to our previous discussion, when I think I was talking about sacred secular and I forgot to mention this, but this notion of reciprocity, right? Which I mean, which is an indigenous earth-based value, right? And it comes like this notion of creativity, this notion of intelligence, this notion of what anything new that we're bringing into the world. There is also an understanding that it's a gift to us from the other worlds, right? Like it really is a gift to us, right? And reciprocity means slowing down and just being like, oh, and how am I giving back? And there's so many ways to kind of like be doing that giving back, which can take the form of like ritual offerings or whatever, right? But it can take, so there's something about consciously asking and enacting relations of reciprocity, right? Which again, I think a lot of it is about, if that is a technology that seeks to keep us unconscious, because I think at this point the only way in which we can participate in it is by keeping parts of us unconscious, at least, is by awakening our like that consciousness, our intelligence, right? Like our natural intelligences. So yeah, and so really, like, yeah, and I think it's again, reciprocity is not just a word, right? Like it's sort of like, again, you kind of like awaken that understanding within yourself, and you really ask yourself that again and again and again. So those are just some insufficient, incomplete, inadequate thoughts that came to my head. So
Thanks. Thank you. And yeah, I just want to throw into this mix of resistance that ironically, perhaps not talking about intelligence, knowledge is power. And at this point, there's so much on this internet for the period of time when we have an internet. I mean, this call will be recorded and then it's going to be stored in a data center. Like it everything that we have is based on this extractive system. Not everything we have, but everything we have in terms of technology and our ability to communicate using these devices. Knowing that, though, taking advantage of it to research, to look into it, to know what is perhaps my responsibility in being part of this world right now, this matrix. What is my convenience costing others, including my own soul, but earth and others far from me, particularly communities of color, particularly communities in the global south and indigenous communities. um, and to know, to arm ourselves with that weapon of knowledge and ultimately of wisdom. And to that effect, I have put together all sorts of resources in a doc, which Dan and I will figure out how to make that available to folks that came to the session or that will be listening to this, because I geeked out on amassing as many interesting and poignant articles about all these themes. But what was shared here in this particular way of earth wisdom and ancestral remembrance is unique. And so I want to thank each of you, Monica, Ukombwa, and Tiakasin, for offering your voice and wisdom to this evening. So grateful. And with that, Tiakasin, you close us out? It's coming through to share on the resistance of this annihilative force and remembering earth-based.
Well, thank you for this honor. With this, just start small. So we're starting small, and it will, expand. It will grow because it needs to. It's homegrown, organic, as you say. But I'm looking forward to where's the language that separates the technology and the human. The being of the human, and a lot of things that to be careful of is the addiction to technology. Because for me, when I had my experience with technology and computers in the 80s and early 90s, is that to begin to educate the wisdom out of myself. Technology took something away, took a while to come back. And when there's the addiction, there is no regeneration. We could say that, but how people are holding it is they're romancing AI, which is another hidden epidemic, which is an addiction. So romancing AI this way, and even some people are taken to a place where it's inaccessible. And with that, the people doing that, they have the language down. They've got the, whatever program they're using lately. That you are not a mystic if you use AI. But some people are beginning to think that they are. And that becomes, you separate yourself from yourself. So again, to really understand how these binary outcomes are, either you're turned on or off, or you're stuck with the in between of if, because these are the options of a computer, on or off, or if. So now the perplexity that we're at this stage of this so-called human consciousness is stuck in the conscience of whether we could go forward with the technology, which bleeds out into all the aspects of religion and government and even the military. And I think part of this is always understanding Earth first, and understanding Earth is not a terrorist. And people living with Earth, not on Earth, but living with Earth, are not terrorists. They're actually, as Kumbha said before, it's sustainability. And these cultures that technology is trying to rid your mind of to take you into an advanced state, so-called, but you're becoming an energy cell for that technology. And the relationship is here. And we need to keep these. So yeah, addiction keeps you unconscious. This is what technology is doing. You see with the babies, the kids, the intelligence has gone down and dumbed us down rather than advanced us. So if you're not in contact with humans and even with nature, we're not going to have that language anymore. And that's what I see is missing, is a language of awe, a language of consciousness. It's not there anymore because now we are into technology, and we want to always try to relate, even relegate our thoughts toward the rationalization to accept AI to accept technology. And we could say, well, humans have always had technology. You see where this is? We make it softer. We could call it warm data and say it's in systems. But in my language, it's mitakui oyasi. Again, everything is in a relationship from what you can't see to what you do see. And is technology part of that? Of course it is. But we can't let one become dominant over another because Earth-based languages have no concept or word. Now think about this. Cultures without a language for domination. In my language, there's no word or concept for domination. You see what technology is doing now. You see what the ships have done, even to their own people before. So we have to understand this as a whole history involving all of us, yes. And those who know nothing about technology, who don't want to. We have to make choices here. So it's either living with Earth or not. It's just plain, it's simple. So we need to start understanding this language. And I think it's here. Actually, it's here. It's present. Instead of speaking a present phobic language, we have to understand what's going on now. And yeah, I'm so glad that some of you were able to understand me, because I tend to just kind of go into my own world of dimensional thinking. And I appreciate all of you being here and listening to my fellow friends here. And maybe we'll do this again. And maybe I would like to hear some of your thoughts in conversation sometimes. But thank you for the sidebar, for all your messages. I will read them. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Keep the
Thank you,
convo
everyone.
going.
See y'all tomorrow.
Thank you, Pooja, for inviting us to this important conversation. Yeah.
Thank you for saying yes. Yeah, so delighted. And thank you, Andre, for hosting us.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah.
And for all those here that witness the conversation and hold the conversation and support or not, but yeah, thank you for the beings and spirits here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll meet
So,
again.
I
Okay.
hope so.
See you all.